It's about taming the chaos. It's about going and finding those edges and making sure you handle them well. You're not thinking that this is actually a multi-million-dollar problem. You're probably not investing in it right. We're focused on reliability. We're focused on the outcome. We're focused on the world we want to live in. The biggest benefit to the CrowdStrike outage is it reminds the world at a large that we rely on this digital infrastructure. It's super hard. When it's your baby, when you care about it, when you've worked on it for decades of your life, and somebody tells you, basically, your baby's ugly and you're wasting your time, the path up is to be the hero, the firefighter, to show up in the middle of the outage and fix it. You're the smartest person and you can solve the problems. That's not actually what we want.
I love engineering. Probably the only group of people you can tell them, oh, you guys are lazy. And they're like, thanks.
You got to keep hustling. You got to go out and keep ensuring that you're really solving the problem. Otherwise, you're off making yourself feel good. But if you're not providing value to your customers, it's just not going to last.
Today, I bring you a guest that really doesn't need much introduction if you've been in the SRE space or chaos engineering specifically. Kolton Andrus. Kolton, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the kind words.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just because I've known you for a little while. So you're the founder of Gremlin, been the CEO for a while. I believe you're a CTO now. How are you feeling about today?
It's been a journey. It's been a lot of hard work. As you mentioned, I started out as CEO, came to the point where I decided my talents were best served as CTO, went and found a good business partner to help run the go-to-market side. And I think the last couple of years, I've just been deep in the product. We'll talk a little bit about it, but trying to fix the problems with chaos engineering and make it better, easier, more value to customers.
There you go. The problems with chaos engineering. As you can probably pick up, this is going to be our main topic today. And it's going to be a little bit emotional because chaos engineering is frankly one of the things that are very close to my heart. So if you rewind back, when was the first Chaos Conf? Was that 2017, 2018? When did you organize the first one?
2017 or 2018.
Yeah, I remember going to that. And I was in the middle of doing my own chaos engineering experiment. I was in a big financial institution I'm not going to name here. And then I see these guys, they actually turned it into a really neat product and even got this really cool green mascot. And I really liked it. So that's when we met, followed Gremlin all this time along. You no longer do the conferences, right? I believe the last one was 2021 or something. And then after COVID, did it never recover?
We did a couple of live events, 2018, 2019. In 2020, when everything hit with COVID, we did a failover conf and we picked up a bunch of SRE topics that didn't have a home. Yeah. And that was very successful. And then 2021, we really just didn't want to do a virtual conference. We didn't feel like it was going to be as impactful. There's something about getting everybody in the same. It's opportunities like when you and I met. Or just you can't get that virtually. And I think the last year or two, the question has been, is Chaos Conf the right thing for us to put a lot of time and energy behind? So it's been on hiatus and no plans at the moment to bring it back.
That's sad. But yeah, you really hitting the nail on the head. There's something magical that kind of happens when you put people in the same room, and it's just so hard to replicate online. Are you continuing with the failover as well, or is that on hiatus as well?
It's also on hiatus. We paused a bit on doing a lot of our own conferences and focused on going and attending other people's conferences. But I think part of what I've seen is people just have conference fatigue. I see less folks excited about going to conferences. I guess part of it is I don't have a conference I'm very excited about to go talk to people about this topic. I feel like some of the ones I've hit in the past aren't the right home. So maybe I'm telling you why I should be doing the conference instead of why I shouldn't be. But it's yeah.
Yeah, there are obviously very good conferences like SRE Day coming up in London that you are welcome to join. But yeah, there is something about that. And I don't know what exactly happened after COVID, but it feels different, right? It's not the same. Like the hallway track is not the same. We're trying our best to replicate with the conferences that we run. But I don't know, some of the magic is gone. But Maybe for anybody who's wondering what the hell we're even talking about, for us, chaos engineering is like the second nature now and doesn't necessarily need an explanation. But very quickly, 1 minute, so that people don't have to Google what is chaos engineering.
Yeah, it's a good point. So quick introduction as well for those who maybe don't know me. I'm an engineer by trade. I worked for Amazon and Netflix. I built fault injection tooling and services for them before I founded Gremlin, which is a company focused on building chaos engineering reliability solutions to help people build reliable systems. And so chaos engineering in a nutshell is we're going to go out and we're going to inject a small amount of harm or failure into a system to understand how it behaves. And there's a couple of different ways you can think about this or talk about this. So I'll jump on my soapbox here. I think chaos engineering, cool idea. It's a bit of a misnomer. It's a little bit misnamed.
There you go.
Because whenever you tell someone, I do chaos engineering, they think you're the Joker. They think you're just out there causing chaos and mayhem. And let's set the world on fire and see what happens. And that's the mistake. It's really the engineering part. It's about understanding how the system behaves in the face of chaos. It's about taming the chaos. It's about going and finding those edges and making sure you handle them well so that nobody notices when these types of things occur.
But you did lean heavily into that fun side of things with Gremlin, right? The name itself.
It's an interesting branding exercise, right? And I've personally gone back and forth on it. I love the Gremlin mascot. I love the idea of the Gremlins are the bad guys. We're there to catch them. We're there to find them. But there's a little bit of we're unleashing them to let them go do their thing. Yeah. And I think it's a little bit like the problem with chaos engineering. It's fun. It's cool. It's exciting. But sometimes when you're talking to enterprise software executives, they don't want fun or cool or exciting. They have a problem, which is things are breaking a lot. And they don't want something they perceive as immature. They want something mature that's going to come in and solve their problem.
Oh man, all this memory is now rushing back to me. A bit of an overload, but you were part of the original gang who we can basically blame for this naming exercise, weren't you?
Funny you mentioned that. Yeah, so when I worked on this at Amazon, which predated Chaos Monkey, it was fault injection, failure testing. It wasn't chaos engineering at that point. And while we were rolling that out at Amazon is when the canonical Netflix blog came out and they called it Chaos Monkey and they talked about what they were doing. A side note, the system I built at Amazon, we rebooted host and a whole bunch of other things. So Chaos Monkey to me was cool in the idea and the marketing, but a little simplistic in the implementation. Mm-hmm. But then when I arrived at Netflix, first of all, the chaos engineering was culturally bought in, which was great. That allowed us to go make a lot of changes, improvements. We didn't have to fight uphill to get people to do the right thing. But yeah, I remember when there was a Google Doc that was shared around amongst the company that we were editing and commenting on that said, we're going to brand this chaos engineering. And my comment was, I think this is a sexy name, but is it accurate? Is it actually what we're trying to accomplish? And I lost that one on the branding front. And then mea culpa, I went to market and said, people know this chaos engineering. It's got some momentum behind it. Let's put our energy behind that and see how far it goes.
And it's going well, right? But you're still at it.
That's right. Yeah. It's taken us this far.
Exactly. If you were to go back, what would you call it? So that it's sexy enough that people turns heads and at the same time, it doesn't have the same problem. I'm sure you've given a lot of thought to it. What would you call it?
Yeah. So anything that I'm talking about or Gremlin's talking about nowadays, we're focused on reliability. We're focused on the outcome. We're focused on the world we want to live in. And so I think reliability engineering or resilience engineering, something along those lines, I think the engineering part's key. There's a discipline, a rigor that comes with the engineering side that's important. But yeah, I think chaos puts people off thinking about how we're going to do it instead of what the end goal is. And sometimes that's a distraction. So I'd choose reliability engineering.
Which is a little bit of an overloaded term as well. You've got the SRE, you've got the reliability in the broader term in the engineering. But yeah, incidentally, I had almost exactly the same path. Back then, when I discovered that I was supposed to be calling that chaos engineering, we're basically setting up first Kubernetes clusters. And got all these moving parts and we wanted them to not break. So we basically evolved into the scripts that turn off certain things or introduce the kind of failure that we saw previously happened. And we wanted to really make sure that we're resilient to that going forward. And then over the time, I was like, oh, chaos engineering, that's a cool name. Let me start using that. And very shortly afterwards learned that it goes much better if I don't mention the chaos part and I just call it reliability. And then at the time, I thought it was just like a finance thing, but it wasn't, was it?
Yeah, I think to your engineer, to your IC that's doing the work, chaos engineering is fine because they're going to look past that to what it is. I think the problem, it's the marketing problem. It's the director of engineering. It's the VP of finance who's signing the PO. And they're like, what are you doing? It's the CTO who isn't really read in and doesn't like the sound of it. And so, yeah, if you rub people the wrong way up front, now you've got to work to convince them. And I found myself in so many conversations where they just were firing at me. Oh, we don't need chaos. We got enough chaos. Things break all the time. And I'm like, we're here to solve the chaos. And they're like, then why is it chaos engineering? And so, yeah, interesting to hear that you went through the same journey and came to much the same conclusion.
Yeah, as engineers, we often think of marketing as just an afterthought, but turns out it's actually very important. So I'm thinking about CrowdStrike and what we went through. And funny story, I was actually traveling during that time and I saw this rows and rows of blue screens of devs all over the place. When you prepare, or at least when I used to give chaos engineering presentations, you would collect these and then use them on your slides and be like, oh, this is such a good example. It costs so much and we could have prevented that. Do you think that's a good example? Would it have been prevented if they used Gremlin or any other tool?
Yeah, it's interesting. I did the same. I always keep an eye for the latest big outages and see if we can get numbers on the impacts. And that's part of what makes it important to the business is, hey, if you're not thinking that this is actually a multi-million-dollar problem, you're probably not investing in it right. Yeah, I think CrowdStrike is probably not the best one for us, actually, because of the nature of it. Because it's an OS level, you can't boot the host. I mean, yeah, we can cause a host to reboot and we could shut down hosts in a hard way. I wouldn't recommend that failure test to most of my customers because it's what are you trying to learn from that? Hey, if your host can't boot up, is that going to be a problem? Oh, the answer is yes. We know the answer is yes. We don't really need to run that experiment. Now, I think when it comes to if we could isolate the failure to the CrowdStrike component, so if we could have some control over the kind of update that's happening, the kernel level failure that was occurring, if we could replicate like a bad update that caused that scenario. But the key is you really also need to be testing for some sort of resilience mechanism. And so does Windows have a way to detect a bad update and fall back to the prior one? It's funny. We learned this in the graphics driver industry. If you apply a bad graphics driver, it waits 15 seconds and rolls it back. And so I think that's the missing piece. If there's a mitigation for us to go test, we can go cause the failure and then see the system respond appropriately. But if we have no mitigation and the answer is just go blue screen a bunch of Windows hosts and see what happens. So I guess maybe that's the Windows level view. And an organizational view, understanding what happens if all of your flight terminals are blue screened. What are your processes? How do you adapt to that? What are the workarounds that you have? That's an interesting exercise to be run. And I think a lot of people had to do that in the moment. Oh, hey, these things aren't available. What do we do now? I don't know. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was so low level that if you try to design an experiment like that, it would be like, oh yeah, we know this is not supported. That would have been it. But just the fact that it's so widespread and so expensive to roll back just made me think that maybe there was something. But I think I agree with you that it probably isn't the best example. So when you do your slides today, what's your favorite example? Which one are you talking about?
I went and picked out a few recently. Actually, there hasn't been a real juicy one before the CrowdStrike that really sticks in my memory. Amazon has something go wrong in a region. Google Azure. There was actually an Azure failure right after the CrowdStrike one, which I heard about from some customers. So that one comes to mind. I think that actually the biggest benefit to the CrowdStrike outage is it reminds the world at a large that we rely on this digital infrastructure.
Yeah.
This isn't the 1990s when we got paper backups and alternatives. We really do rely upon it. And if Windows doesn't work, society grinds to a halt for a day. It's a huge impact to everybody's ability to be productive. Even if it doesn't directly impact you, it impacts somebody you know, somebody you work with. And so I think that's actually the healthy thing is, hey, every business leader, every government leader, you should think about the resilience and reliability of your system. And if it fails, and it fails large scale and publicly, it's going to be bad for you. It's going to be bad for everyone else. So let's make sure we're investing some time and effort to prevent that.
It goes much further than that. You mentioned the electronic systems, and that's obviously a very valid point. But in my head, I was just going back to a few days. I live in East London, and East London has one of those big problems that it has one tunnel to basically cross the river. And there was, I think, a track that went on fire, and they closed the tunnel for like half a day. I think it was about around noon that stopped, and then I still saw traffic around 10 p.m., like the remainders of it clearing up because of one failure. And it's a little bit more tricky with a tunnel because if you want redundancy on that tunnel, it's going to take a decade and billions of dollars. But you get these reminders of this that in everyday life that are all over the place. And we can't always fix them easily because it's got to do with humans and how things are run.
I think that's a great analogy because I think, again, it's our physical infrastructure. When it fails, it's quite obvious how it impacts everybody, what the pain is, and that we don't want that to occur. I think we're still learning that lesson in our digital infrastructure. Yeah. It's not quite as obvious that Windows is like the East London tunnel. And if it goes down, nobody on that side of the river is getting to work that day. And it's a huge impact.
Yeah, it must have hurt. So I wanted to go a little bit back to the evolution. So you mentioned the marketing issues and how we slowly learned that mentioning chaos is a bad idea. And we solved that by rebranding to reliability. Other than the marketing part of it, how would you say the chaos engineering evolved over the last, what is it? You started in 2016, the first version of the product that you hacked probably mostly yourself versus what it is today. How does it differ?
Yeah, and just to be fair, I guess the first version of this I wrote was actually in 2009. So Gremlin was my third iteration, and then we've had 8 years on that. Yeah, I think it's similar to the marketing. What we found was when we started out, we wanted to build a tool for experts. We knew what we needed. We wanted to build people those tools so they could be super effective. Mm-hmm. Let's give you the tool and then you're smart, you'll figure it out. We want to make it safe and simple and secure, but like we didn't really want to be prescriptive and we really wanted to leave the door open for what people wanted to do. And I think one of the things we learned is the tooling and the platform is a part of the equation, but it's actually not the hardest part. Yeah. Getting the company to change their behavior, how you measure it, how you reward people for it, how you hold people accountable for that work is actually the hard part. And so we saw many times where we had great champions that wanted to bring in tooling and they brought it in and they made it optional. And they did a kind of a consultative, hey, if you want to use this, we'll show you how to do it. And a lot of those failed because people didn't have to do it and they're busy. They had other things that they were doing because they didn't really know what to do. I think the two biggest operator problems I saw were, hey, this is a cool idea. What test should I run? And then once I ran the test, how do I know if my system passed?
Yeah.
And so in the beginning, we thought, as SREs, as people that have operated systems, you'll have metrics, you'll have dashboards, you'll have logs, you'll go verify that the right things happened. We'll just make it easy for you to go run the experiment. And what we ended up learning was we needed to build something that closed the loop. We needed to build something that said, hey, average engineer who doesn't think about this all day, here are the 10 tests you should go run. And by the way, let's just wire this up to your monitoring. We'll tell you if you pass or fail, so you don't have to go do a bunch of homework after the fact.
It's almost like what you said, the tools are not the most difficult thing. The most difficult is figuring out the psychology behind and figuring out where the companies are blocking. And yeah, like from my perspective, I've considered chaos engineering to be a major breakthrough in how we run software. And this happens to be a hockey stick podcast, which is why it's on it. Except that basically all the feedback that I was getting like earlier, I was like, oh yeah, this is a very good idea. We should be doing that, but we're probably not going to because A, B, and C.
Yeah,
And I just really couldn't understand that for a very long time. It's like, how can you tell me this is a great idea, we should be doing that, and then quickly follow up with, oh, we won't be doing that probably because we don't have time. And to your point of the psychology, like understanding where the blockages are and packaging that in a way that actually sells has been really difficult from where I was sitting. So I had that little tool I wrote back in the day, and it's not really longer maintained, Powerful Seal, but it stopped at the tool part of it. It wasn't able to tell you why you should be doing that. It wasn't able to convince you to do that. It was more like what you described, like Linux approach. You've got all the tools, you can do whatever you want with it, it's expert. Whereas maybe what was needed was more like a macOS approach. Here's one button. Hopefully click it.
The easy button.
Yeah. You have one way of clicking it. Hopefully you don't mess it up.
Yeah. So I think that's what we learned on the kind of operator side is let's tell people what we think they should run. Let's have an opinion. So we came up with a set of tests that we think are the 80-20. We think there's only so many things that go wrong. Go run these 10 tests. You'll cover the majority of it. So I think that was half of it. But the other half of it is, how do you get your boss to fund it? How do you get promoted for the work that you do? How does the organization value what you do? And my favorite question when I'm going into a new customer, new business is, if I do a great job, if your team does a great job on this work, how do they get promoted for it? And that's a tough one because in our space, we know how you get fired. You cause a huge outage, you lose a bunch of money, you consistently fail. We'd love to say that doesn't exist, but that's your path out. What's your path up? And the truth is, I think this is the misalignment of incentives. For a lot of people, the path up is to be the hero, the firefighter, to show up in the middle of the outage and fix it very publicly and let everyone know you're the smartest person and you can solve the problems. But that's not actually what we want. We want those problems to never show up. We want people to do chaos engineering and reliability testing as part of their build and deploy pipeline, as part of their normal development, so that there is no outage, so that there isn't some firefighting moment. But then how do those people get promoted for that work? Who gets promoted for a boring system that just does what it should? And so what we did is we came up with a rubric. We came up with a score. We have service owners. Let's score their services and let's score them based on these tests we're running that now we know whether they passed or failed. And if you can withstand all these failures and your service continues running healthy, you get a top score. If you lose a zone or a region and your service goes down, you get a lower score. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to have service level, team level, org level, company level metrics that measure not what has happened, how many outages did we have. It gives us an idea of what is our risk posture moving forward. And so I think that really helps us change the discussion, change the way our champions, our leaders are thinking about it, to help them think about, oh, this is about risk mitigation. It's a little bit more like security. My goal is to have no outages. My goal is to have no breaches. But the way I get there is I understand my risks, I prioritize them, I mitigate them, and I keep an eye to make sure we're not regressing on it. And I think that's the kind of rigor and discipline that's been missing in our space that really helps address this problem.
So you basically gamified it for them a little bit, right? You gave them SAM score to look at and compete over. Has that worked?
Yeah. So funny you mentioned gamification, because we had this idea at Amazon. We wanted to gamify the whole thing. And we did little elements, but not really. And early days at Gremlin, we had this discussion and we chose not to gamify it too much. And I think it's the balance of, yes, we are gamifying it, but if you make it too video gamey, it's not corporate, it's not professional. You got to speak the language of your buyers, which is dashboards and metrics that they can look at. And yeah, I think it has been effective. I think we're having much better conversations with senior leadership. Some of our most advanced customers are rolling this out across their companies. And so now they have their kind of 80-20. Every team needs to go run some basic tests and they can automate them. And if they're passing, cool, nothing else to do. And that frees up the SRE team to go focus on the glue, the other pieces, the unknown parts of the system, or the system-wide tests. And it gives people a way to see progress, to see that they're making forward progress as opposed to just playing whack-a-mole is what I think a lot of ops can devolve into, just taking care of the latest fire.
Did you find that there are certain fields where it goes smoother, where people just get it more easily than the others, or not necessarily?
Yes, I'd say early days, we found that e-commerce really understood it. They understood the cost of downtime. They were trying to run lean ships. And so every minute mattered and they cared about investing in this. I think where we've found the best fit over the last few years has been in heavily regulated industries, finance industries, et cetera. And actually this kind of scoring, this more methodical approach fits well there because they have, and you well know this, they have auditor constraints, they have compliance, they need to make sure they can prove some of these aspects. And so I think it fits in well. The old school disaster recovery testing was, hey, we've got a written plan and maybe we execute it once a year. The new school is we've got a set of tests that we run regularly so we can show you at any point that we are actually resilient to the things we're concerned with.
And Boeing comes to mind, and maybe they should be doing a little bit more of that kind of work.
Amen.
Rough patch lately, to say the least.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me. I think that tracks the kind of extra incentive to be able to demonstrate that you're doing something for industries like finance. That makes sense to me. Did you find that there are particular industries where it's just whatever you do, they don't seem to get it?
I think surprising to me, because I'm a big video gamer, the gaming industry, it feels, is a little behind here. They do some of this, but every time a new game launches, a new patch comes out, or I see the types of things that fail. And I was like, nobody failure tested what happens when your authentication service goes down. Because I'll tell you what, this is unexpected behavior here.
Yeah, I think the standards are just a little different. It seems to be very, I don't want to say widely accepted, but I guess more accepted. For example, you delay one console release because, whoops, you found more bugs and the game keeps crashing. So when you're talking about authentication server not being handled when it's down or whatever, that's down there, down the road. Let's fix the null pointers first.
Like all software, that's the other problem is you try to just do it at the end, there's not enough time. And so my advice is, just like unit testing, just like integration testing, you should be doing failure testing, reliability testing as part of your process. And I think this is one of the other social, psychological problems is people think, oh, I need to stop the world and just do this for 2 weeks. And the answer is no. Spend 1 hour a week with your team talking about this and working on this, and watch yourselves get just massively better week over week.
Yeah. But I think you're also battling the human nature itself to a certain extent, because there is a reason why, for example, everybody rushes to the gym in January and then they forget about that a month later and the membership just goes unused. And a lot of people would much prefer to once a year take a magical pill that solves that problem rather than every day have the discipline to look after their bodies. And it's no different to looking after their systems, right? You have to do the extra work that you probably might get away with not doing because until something bad happens, nobody notices. So you always gonna have that problem, right, that you'll be fighting against.
Yeah, I think the workout analogies fit rather well here. So one of them, back to people that say, hey, this sounds like a great idea. We're not ready, so we're not going to do chaos engineering today. That's saying I want to lose 10 pounds, but I'm not in shape to do it, so I'm not going to go to the gym.
Exactly.
And the answer is, if you want to lose 10 pounds, you got to go to the gym. You want your system to get better, you got to start doing it. You can't just put it off. I think to your point, though, people often will do the path of least resistance, or they'll try to optimize. I think it's a virtue that engineers are lazy and try to do the minimum amount of work because that's what helps us scale. But you're right. Sometimes people are like, wow, that looks like a lot to do, and I'm not sure how to do it, so I won't do it. And I think my answer there has been, if you want people to do the right thing, you need to make it easy. And so a lot of this, let's build test suites and let's automatically wire it up to monitoring so we can tell you whether you passed. And let's make it easy for you, just click a button and we'll run all the tests and we'll handle the safety. That's all meant to take as much toil out of the process as possible so people can focus on the results and the outcome.
By the way, I love engineering. It's probably the only group of people when you can tell them, oh, you guys are lazy. And they're like, thanks.
You betcha.
Yeah. So looking back at was it 2016? So about 8 years that you've been doing Gremlin. And like you said, you started earlier with the previous iterations, but it's a very unique path, right? Most startups, you can validate quickly-ish whether there is a product market fit or whether they're solving a particular problem that is a real problem. And for you, in chaos engineering, you've had this weird situation when you had both the feedback on, oh yeah, this is a real thing. Yeah, we've got real reasons to do that. And then turns out that you have to break through this another layer or two of human psychology and kind of solve these problems at all. How has it affected your journey? How has it been if you just look at the 8 years that you spent doing it?
Yeah, it's a very astute observation. And I think I would love to work in a field where it was very obvious early on that you hit it and you were done and you could just sit back and scale. I don't know what that looks like. Yeah, I think along the way, I got early feedback. Wow, this is a big problem. Wow, a bunch of companies care. You've got amazing logos. You guys are off to the races. You must have product market fit. Just go scale the company to the moon and sit back and watch the magic happen. And we took that advice and we tried that approach, and the pandemic hit. And I think it was a combination of, this is a not yet proven technique and approach, still relatively new. People were shedding unknown certainty. And so a lot of people paused or stopped or took a step back from their fault injection chaos engineering work at that time. Again, to your point earlier, it was a bit of a shock to me. It's like everything's online. You would think that's our time to focus on the reliability of being online. And yet a bunch of people are like, we got other things to worry about right now. I remember being told in 2019, you clearly have product market fit. And then I remember being told in mid 2020, you clearly do not have product market fit. Just what are you doing, Kolton? And yeah, it's hard. It's super hard. When it's your baby, when you care about it, when you've worked on it for decades of your life, and somebody tells you basically your baby's ugly and you're wasting your time, it's a mental and a heart strain, and it's a lot of hardship. And I think what I did was I said, what we built wasn't good enough. We can do better, but I don't think it's wasted. I don't think we were wrong. I just think we need to go approach it a little differently. And it's really that crisis that caused me to go get a CEO to run the go-to-market side of the business. There were some things I wish I'd done better there, some things I had to learn. And so I thought, let's get somebody else. Maybe they can do a better job than I did on that front. And I'm going to go deep on the product. And I'm going to go address these problems that I've seen that I know are there, but we haven't really gotten a solution to. And yeah, a couple of years later, I think it's a little bit more of the same. Things are good. The product feels good. It feels like it's solving the problem, but it's not clear that it's like we've entirely solved the problem. It's not clear that it's entirely done. And so I think it's a little bit of my life lesson, a little bit of startup lesson, but you got to keep hustling. You got to go out and keep ensuring that you're really solving the problem, solving it well, solving what your customers need you to. Otherwise, you're off making yourself feel good. But if you're not providing value to your customers, it's just not going to last.
Sure. And I just want to say that actually is very impressive to me. I think for a lot of people, it will be very hard to give up the main big dog job and focus on something else, especially after such a long time working on it. So I think it takes a lot of balls to do that, and I find it very impressive. We had a chat about what the CTO is, and I think that was episode 5 with Alan Williamson. He wrote a very good book about the misconceptions about CTO, what it actually means, and I think you really embody that amazingly. Kudos for that.
Thank you.
If we were to make some predictions and look a little bit more into the future, for you personally, for Gremlin and for chaos engineering / reliability engineering as a whole, where do you see those 3 lines on the graph go?
Yeah, I'm focused on what's in front of me. I think too early for me to move to a tropical island and leave my worries behind. I got a bunch of kids. They're all late high school, early college years. And that's a lot of why I do this, is trying to build and prepare and leave things for my children that I didn't have. So me and Gremlin, we're one and the same because we got work left to do. I think from Gremlin's front, we just rolled out a new set of features around intelligent health checks. So some customers don't have good alerting, or they're running in staging and they don't really have monitoring set up. And so our whole premise that we can tell you whether your system passes or fails is predicated upon your alerting, your monitoring. And so we thought, for customers that don't have that, let's just go do it for them. And so if you're an AWS customer, we can just tie into your load balancers, and we can look at your error rate, your latency, and your throughput, and we can make a judgment call on whether your system has remained healthy. And I think that's really where we're starting to get to where I wanted to be years ago. The fault injection piece is fairly straightforward. There's a lot of subtlety to it, but it's fairly straightforward in and of itself. But how do we do things for our customers? How do we do testing on your behalf? How do we detect health on your behalf? How do we do more of that thoughtful analysis? And when I say that, what I really mean is, how do we take the expertise that me and a lot of the engineers on my team have learned by being on call for these large distributed systems for a long time, that sense we've developed, that the instinct we've honed, how do we take elements of that and embed it into the product so you get a me on your team? How do you get Kolton on your team by just using Gremlin? And so I think that's the direction we want to go there, is let's build expertise and intelligence in a way that really guides people and helps them get to the right answer faster. I think for the industry as a whole, it's an interesting one. A lot of folks recently, they always want to say, what's your take on AI? Is that going to solve reliability?
There we go.
And my answer is no, it's not. Bad news. I don't think AI is the answer here. I think machine learning and intelligent analysis plays a role. So I'm not saying there's no room for artificial intelligence, but when we're talking about ChatGPT and the like, first of all, I need something deterministic. I'm doing very complex operations on distributed systems that need to work. I can't have a system that probabilistically gives me the right answer. I need the right answer definitively. I think there's a lot of value in getting coaching or guidance based on what's available on the internet. But in terms of, could you just embed an AI agent into your product and have it tell people, here are the tests you should run? Could you have it look at the results and tell people, here's what the answer is? So again, the intent there, we're aligned. I want to do that. I want to be able to look at people's systems and tell them what tests they should run, or look at their system while we're running it and tell them not just did it pass or fail, but here's why it failed. Here's what you need to go fix. So I love that. I'm just not convinced that like the models that we have today are really an avenue to achieve that in the near term.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing wrong with the co-pilot model when it helps you. I've been changing my mind a little bit, because initially it's easy to buy into this hype of, oh yeah, because we didn't have anything, I don't know, a year ago, and now we have this, that means that if in my simple mammalian brain, I just extrapolate that, that means that it's going to get so much better in a linear time very soon, which probably isn't true. Hardly anything is linear in life. But then I just evolved to think that actually this kind of co-pilot things that kind of solve a lot of the low-hanging fruit and the repetitive things, and I can ask it and maybe it gives me a better answer than going to Google. Or maybe we can autocomplete a little bit more intelligently with the other things because it's just pattern matching at that stage and that's been done 50,000 times before. It's actually pretty cool, and it's a pretty cool way to live your life. And especially for languages that are a little bit like, I don't think I'll ever learn the bash syntax. I have to look up how to do a loop every single time. And at this stage, I'm too afraid to ask. Why can't I just have a thing help me with that? And I think in that respect, there's probably quite a bit of value that we can extrapolate. It's just not going to be like, okay, yeah, get the Kolton AI, Kolton LLM, and deploy that.
Yeah.
But that would make for a much nicer sci-fi movie, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be more fun.
Yeah, we'll also use a hologram and hover around because those are mandatory qualities for AI in any sci-fi movie, as we know.
I think AI that just makes you better at what you do, great. And I'm super excited. I was telling my kids, the universal translator, while we're talking sci-fi, that one's pretty close. Yeah. The ability to have fluent conversations across language barriers, that's a huge boon to us as humanity. So I'm excited for that. And anywhere, as you said, that we can take our natural engineering expertise and augment it so we can go faster, so we don't have to remember details that aren't important, that's all great. But yeah, I also agree. There's the AI that replaces our jobs. I've never not lost a single moment of sleep over that, because there's no way we're anywhere close to an AI replacing you or I today.
That's a reassuring message. Last question for you. So from your unique perspective, it's one of my favorite questions stolen from Tim Ferriss. If you were to put a message on a billboard and a lot of people would see it, and let's say you happen to put it in San Francisco, where half of the billboards seem to be about tech startups anyway, what would you put on that?
That's an interesting one. Early days, we took the rebel approach where we said things like break things on purpose. When we really challenged people, challenged the status quo, think about doing things differently. Yeah. Today, I'm probably a little bit more in the do a little better every day camp. I think the kind of things that we need, this is a bit my life philosophy, is learn a little something, get a little better. You don't have to do it all at once. And I think that also applies to reliability and distributed systems. I'm fixing a part of my system that sucks, and it was left to me over a couple of years and it was untended. It's not fun. And I could stop the world and make it the only thing I worked on, but it's not quite that important. And so it's my Friday morning problem. Friday morning over coffee every week, I'm like chipping away at this problem. And you know what? I'm learning stuff. I'm fixing it. I'm going to make it better. And I get some fulfillment and some mastery from being able to make the world a better place and just make an impact, make things better every day.
Love that. That reminds me of that scene from BoJack the Horseman.
I've seen that show.
To run, and then he basically collapses. I think it was some kind of weird monkey figure, and the guy's, yeah, it gets easier a little bit every day. And I think that's a good philosophy to live by. All right, Kolton, always great to hang out with you. Thank you for your time, and I'll get you next time.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.